Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you'll see a little link down below to officehours.global. You can click there and find out more information about what we're doing here. If you are already in Mukana and you found your way there, then you are a producer, and your questions and your votes will drive the entire conversation. First hour is always general conversation about anything you'd like to ask around media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about the Olympics. We're going to look at a couple of clips and probably get this YouTube thing turned off, but we'll see how it goes. And we'll just plot along here and talk about a little bit of the footage and talk about what we can learn from watching other people's productions. There's a lot that's always hidden in these frames, and so we're going to go through a couple frames from stuff I literally grabbed from this morning's broadcast, and we'll just kind of look at some of the cameras and graphics and so on and so forth, and you'll get to see how I watch everything. so anyway, we'll jump into that in the second hour. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Bill, what do we got?
Absolutely. Our first one comes from Australia, in Vienna, Austria, I believe. How do you maintain high quality broadcasting, for example, in Zoom meetings, during periods of travel and touring? What gear would you recommend for a lightweight, minimalist setup, such as in a hotel?
And yeah, Vienna. Vienna swapped her name, so Vienna from Australia. Vienna. Oh. So no, Vienna. So we've had some fun with this because there's been a lot of confusion. The only Vienna that we have, there's no Vienna in Austria. Vienna is a frequent after hours guest. Someday we'll get onto office hours, but it's Vienna, and she's in Australia. So anyway, so go ahead. What do we got? Go ahead, Rupert.
So you want to go with a good camera. I mean, the Brio is a good travel option, so long as you can get some good light. Of course, that's another consideration. For mobile, I mean, make sure you take an Ethernet cable and an Ethernet dongle, because you may be in locations that have wired Ethernet, and if it's there, you want to be able to take advantage of that. If the Wi-Fi is shaky, which it could be, you may find it's better to be on 4G. So you can hotspot through your phone probably, but it's probably better to take the time and a little bit of money in getting a good quality 4G hotspot. You can then kind of put that in an area where it has the best 4G coverage and kind of bridge the gap that way.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I've been doing this for a long time around the world, and Korea was the latest one the last couple of years, and it's tough because you want to really stuff everything into smaller cases. So I've done webcams and stuff like that. And then the biggest thing is GL iNet has these little slates, which are awesome little routers that connect up to the source Wi-Fi or source internet, and then it can reduplicate a Wi-Fi signal. So then I can use something like NDI for the phone. And I'll do a 2-camera setup, whether it be one being a webcam, one being the phone, because then I can then use it as a roaming device. But I also bring a capture card for my bigger camera, which I'll bring every now and then.
Go ahead, Carl.
I'd suggest like an iPad bracket. So the iPad actually pumps out 16:9 from the Zoom app on the iPad. We see Kami in after hours, of course, coming in from his iPad. So I think that's probably a good screen. It gives you a large screen. I know it's off to the side. The camera is off to the side. You have to remember that when you're looking into the camera. But the iPad may be one of the better cameras to take with you, because it's probably something you already have, rather than the iPhone and trying to adapt the iPhone through like an A10 mini or something. Lighting is important though if you're going to use the iPad. So make sure you have 2 like NAND lights, small NAND lights that pump out maybe 30 or 40 watts each.
Nigel.
Yeah, well, I'm away from home in the UK, so I have my Brio on top of my Mac. I have a Pulson. I have my little in-ear device, and they go into a USB device into the Mac. So don't forget that your Mac only takes USB-C. So if you're going to bring mics and headphones, you got to bring a little converter.
Aaron, and then Stuart.
Yeah, I think one thing that hasn't been mentioned very much is light. And I think the Pavo tubes are really good. Any of these little, what Alex has, any of these little two foot or foot, whatever, lights are great. And they pack up nice and small. And
Go ahead, Stuart.
I'm going to stick with all the budget options and stuff that I know is available in Australia. So Vienna, 4G router that you can pack in. It's got a battery in it, takes a SIM card. They're available at Telstra stores, as you can see the Telstra logo on it, and JB Hi-Fi. If you go into JCar, you can pick up a 7 dB aerial that plugs in the TS9 ports on the bottom of it. You've got a primary and secondary one, so you can boost your signal. That obviously is a network switch as well and all that. So just a basic generic router or switch will help. I use the same camera that I'm using right now, but I will use a USB capture card like dongle and plug straight into the laptop. And I will do the same with a microphone just for simplicity of connection and carry. The hardest part, as other people have said, is lighting, and the little LED lights that will go on the hot shoe will get you going as long as you diffuse them and throw as much light as you can, as soft as possible. That's pretty much what I used when I came into here while out on location on a film recce.
I'll actually be on the road on Friday for our 500th. I'll be down in LA, and so I'll be taking these. There are 4 of these. These are Pavo tubes. They're just tiny. They're small. They're easy to use. I use short lighting tripods that have 1/4-20s in them. These have 1/4-20s on both ends. 2 of these are to light me, and 2 of them I'm playing around with the idea. We've been doing some tests of lighting the background. So if I want to put a little blue light back there, or I want to put something else back there, I can have some to kind of create some highlights in the hotel room. I started really thinking I had to up my game after I saw Rupert like convert his hotel room into a studio. I was like, okay, I got to start taking more things. But they don't take up much space. I'm also taking a Brio. That's kind of what I'm planning to use for the camera. Now, my mic system is always a Countryman with a mix pre 3 that goes in because of sound in the hotel room and so on and so forth. And I have one in my pack. So, and that all fits into one little pack that I can put in my suitcase. Sometimes I do have my 6K with me because I'm already shooting test footage for other things. I mean, when I travel, I almost always have the 6K with me because I'm shooting things. So adding one more thing, which is the A10 Mini, it's not that big of a deal for me to have it in the hotel room. I haven't used it all the time that way, but I usually have this. The big thing that takes a lot of space is the 6K because it takes space. But I'm using that to shoot test footage and other things around. I tend to give me some time off and when I'm traveling, and I'll always go out and shoot footage that I'm somewhere. I'm in Amsterdam, or I'm this way, or in this case, LA. I'm going to go out and find things that I can gather because it saves me money from going back again. Go ahead, Rupert.
Just a couple of final thoughts. One other thing I find useful is to have a laptop stand, just to kick up the laptop a little bit and get the screen a little more up towards eye level. And if you can, try and don't rely on, if you're using a Brio, for example, don't rely on hooking it on the screen, because if you're typing and stuff, you're going to get movement. So if you can come up with a separate stand to isolate the movement on your camera, that will help keep you stable.
I find that the carry-on that I usually use, which most of my carry-ons are somewhere in the vicinity of 9 by 14 by 22 inches, turns out that rise of about 9 inches does really well with the laptop. So usually my carry-on is, I unpack my carry-on and then it sits under my laptop, and that's what raises everything up. All right, next question.
Juan C. Robles in Mexico is up next, and he says, is there a naming convention for after-hours attendees and bots?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
So I've seen many podcasts that do give their listeners a name. It kind of backfires on them. So I'd avoid having the attendees by label. I'd avoid labeling attendees, because we do have some people that choose to just listen, like audio podcasts, and we do have people who turn their cameras on. And I don't want to bifurcate those kind of people just because they choose to not have their camera on, because they like to listen to us in the background. But we can name the bots. I think naming the bots would be a nice thing to do.
We should probably name the bots, but generally our naming convention, which I'm not following perfectly right now, I'll put it in after I make this comment, is your first name, last name, and your location. And that's our request actually for Discord. And we haven't pushed it as much with Discord from when we started, but I find it very interesting to know. And I've literally, you may decide that you don't want to do it, but I've literally hired people because of seeing who they are and then seeing where they live. And I've reached out to them and hired them because I needed somebody in that location. So it's a good idea. You don't have to put your address, but putting the city that you live in or the vicinity isn't a bad idea. Go ahead, Rupert, and then Aaron.
So in after hours, we bring in various meters and different things that bring in some like telemetry in the chat. And the kind of naming convention I've seen or found most useful is the function of whatever the the thing is doing, then a hyphen, and then just who's bringing it in after that.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron?
The location's really helpful for time zone as well.
Yeah.
Since we're all over the place, it helps to know when to expect the reply.
Absolutely. Yeah. Next question.
Rupert McCrae from Dallas, Texas, up next. While considering attending an in-person trade event, I was asked to sign a waiver agreeing that I may contract COVID-19 at the show. Is the panel seeing such waivers elsewhere? And is this another reason attendees will seek out virtual options?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It just, wow. Like you said that out. I mean, it's fine. I mean, you can tell that someone's lawyer is like, hey, we don't know. We don't know if we can protect people, which is absolutely valid. But if I got that waiver, it would probably be my first step to, I'm not going, so I think that events are going to have a harder and harder time, especially as we go in. We're in about to go into another wave, and there's another wave already building behind it. So it's probably another 6 months of excitement coming, because we have Delta right now, and then we have C37 coming after that. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, so I don't know about events, but in the UK, they do a great tracing process, and they've found what they now have is a ping nightmare where people are saying, you leave your phone number or something, or use the NHS app, and they're losing if you're in proximity to somebody who has COVID, you get pinged, and they're losing large parts of the population and the infrastructure to people being stuck at home because they've been pinged, and that's causing people to react back the other way.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that virtual events are going to continue to be a pretty big deal as we go into the next 6 months, because it's not really safe to do it any other way. Next question.
Frank Hilgers in Naperville is up next with, how much has Zoom technically benefited specifically from office hours?
I don't know if I have any specific things to say there. So, I mean, I think that we're pushing the outer edge of what Zoom does, and so I think that we see things, or things become problematic on our end before that. And, there's definitely people from Zoom that at least keep tabs on what we're doing. Go ahead, Chris.
Zoom would be a shadow of itself if it were not for all of us.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Too bold? Too much?
It's a little bold. It's a little bold. I think they'd probably be okay.
Anyway,
it's a little much. Go ahead, Rupert.
That's coming from a branding person.
Right, exactly. I think you needed a kind of a low, and then some strings that came up behind you as you said that. I think that would have been better. Go ahead, Rupert.
I mean, I was really going to say a lighter version of what Chris did. I mean, without getting too specific, what Zoom has got here is a bunch of people making the best of Zoom and going out there into the real world and championing those features and delivering, good experiences to customers. So I think Zoom is benefiting in that way.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
It'd be interesting on the 500 show, but if you think back to the very beginning, when there was a lot of craziness, office hours really did provide a great deal of support and experimentation, and was greatly appreciate.
And there's many places that we're kind of pushing. I mean, we're now running 24/7 on Zoom. And so we're pushing the outer envelope. If you look at even just this panel right now, this is a picture of the future, not the present, because almost anybody else, any other panel you go to is bad cameras and bad audio and bad lighting, and it's really hard to watch and it's hard to listen to and everything else. And what we're kind of showing is what it could look like if everyone took it seriously, which the panel here does. And I think that is, I think that you get that there's another possibility out there. And I think that then when you look at what we're doing in after hours, I mean, it's, we're basically building a metaverse with video. And that's what everyone's been trying to do, and they won't be able to do it for another 10 years. Like, they're going to keep on working on this metaverse idea. And if we want to shift to that at some point, we will, but we don't need to, because we're using video right now and it's pretty effective. Next question.
Simon Ray in Shrewsbury in the UK says, when sending out a NUC and Brio for remote interviews, what's your preferred remote control software to manage this when it's out in the field?
Go ahead, Rupert.
You may like to have options here. I mean, I like TeamViewer because it's very robust at getting through whatever network it's put on, and that can be a good first step. You may want to use something after that, but TeamViewer is really good for it popping up no matter where you put it, and you being able to get something into it first of all.
Yeah, we're not using the NUCs because they won't produce 1080p, and so for us that's important. And so as a result, we're using the Mac Minis. In the Mac Minis, we're using Apple Remote Desktop, but we need to have TeamViewer or AnyDesk to get us on, and so that we can and then spool up the VPN. And then once we're on the VPN, we pull in. So when we're using a Meraki VPN, that they're all on. So we just simply log in and go with it. I have to admit that we may still move back to the Meraki Z3s, the hardware devices, just because it's easier. It's like it's one little device. If we add it, it just means that the box is a little bit bigger, but no one has to log into anything. It just immediately comes up and it's connected. So we may move back to that. We've been experimenting with trying to get rid of it to make it simpler. We're not sure if it makes it simpler to set up. It does not make it simpler to use. So we're kind of weighing that right now. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas, and here on the panel says, when is the no tag option in the Mukana tag dropdown appropriate?
Jeffrey?
Right before you actually tag the item. Otherwise, no.
I'm not sure why we'd have no tag. Actually, I think it's just a default. It just has no tag if it comes up. I'll talk to Chris about that because it would. I personally think that we should just not let you post the question until you've tagged it. But right now, the way it's set up, it can't work that way. So we'll work on that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next. Sky, can you define double punch? That's a term I've never heard before.
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, it's going to be talked about, I'm hoping, in the second hour, but it's within switching. The other term is fat thumbs. Or fat.
No. Chris.
Fat fingers. But Chris has got, Chris has got, Chris.
Go ahead, Chris.
Back in the old days, before you could pre-program everything into a macro or an emem or something like that, a very common thing to do would be to say you're cutting a basketball game, somebody hits a score, take two, clock and score. So when you take camera 2, clock and score, quite often you're hitting an ME to get the clock into camera 2, but you're also literally hitting another button in the same frame to drop the DSK for the score. And double punching was very common. It was just what you did. And when the Grass 1600 series 1680 graduated to the Grass 300, because it was digitally controlled, the Grass 300 could not actually change 2 cross points simultaneously. They would be a frame apart. So you had anything you wanted to do that was a double punch move on a 1680, you actually had to program into the emem. Interesting, I was playing with the ATEM Mini Extreme ISO the other day, and you can double punch. You can cut a camera and cut in a DSK simultaneously if you haven't pre-programmed it as a macro, and it does it accurately.
Carl? That was a great answer, by the way, Chris. That was spot on. Well, anyway, go ahead, Carl.
So one thing as to Chris said, where you can't do it simultaneously, sometimes I would have one that would fade in. So it'd be a fade in the lower third. So you'd cut to the camera and then instantly it'd fade in. So you wouldn't know when that fade in started. And so that kind of hides the fact that sometimes you couldn't do simultaneous. So that's another trick as well.
Next question.
Australia, Vienna. I'm not even going to put it in the right order because
Bill's reading your name in protest.
Yes. I'm just reading what's in front of me. That is my first rule. Anyway, the question is, how do the panelists prefer to be contacted by clients for jobs? For example, embedded forms on websites, Facebook, direct mail, or phone numbers. What are the pros and cons of these methods?
Go ahead, Aaron.
The more direct, the better. So referrals are really important in my book. I like to work that chain quite a bit.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Sorry, I like a phone call, but these days almost all work requests come in via email, and I abhor text messages because Courtney don't text.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
If you leave me guessing as to what it is and how it works, I probably won't respond, especially if you don't even put a website on there or return email that's just like a standard Gmail address or something like that. A lot of those, I get so many of those that I just kind of gloss over it half the time, and I won't respond.
Go ahead, Richard.
Generally prefer some form of text, so usually email for me, or a website form, just because getting that initial contact, getting the level of details. If you start doing many different shows, I'll start to lose the level of detail unless I have it written down. So I want it written down first, and then follow up with a Zoom or a phone call. And I hate Facebook.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I think this is something that sometimes takes care of itself. You might find that the types of clients you want find the way that you want to be contacted, because you
if you don't use the other ones, then you don't have any clients that are the other way.
You do have to watch out for time wasters. That's the thing.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
Alex knows the only way to get in touch with me is a text message. I currently have, I don't know if you can see this, something like 68,000 unread emails. Sending me an email is a black hole. I tell people, if you're going to send me an email that's important, send me a text message and says, check your email.
My producer does
and
that.
And if you're not in my phone book, I'm not answering the phone, period.
Yeah. It's useless to call me if you're not in my phone book, because my phone doesn't even ring. It just ignores everything that isn't in the book. Go ahead, Stuart.
I'll just say in clear and concise method. So it doesn't matter whether it's text, email, Facebook, it must be clear and concise. Must include at least 2 references to who you are, so that I can make sure I'm talking to the right person, not somebody trying to pretend to be you. And as for anything else, as often as you like, if you've got the budget to hire us.
I think probably the number one place that work comes in for me right now is LinkedIn. I just get people that I've worked with over whatever, in the past. I just had someone come up that I haven't worked with for 5 years and going, hey, we've got a new project. We just want to talk to you about it. And that happens about once a week, of just people coming up that are just someone that I've worked with, someone that I knew. Hey, we've got something coming in. And that just, for me, underlines how important it is to maintain your relationships and leave well, whatever you did, try to close it up well. But I think that's where most of it arrives. Most of the stuff that comes in from our website, we do some of them, but they're usually not the big ones that we work on. They're usually somebody heard about us or me, and that's how it kind of moves through. Go ahead, Bill.
I prefer you to send me a fax.
Fax, yeah. I prefer letters. If you can mail me a letter.
Yeah, that's good too.
Yeah, and I prefer it to be on
a Western Union telegram. Also.
On letterhead. No, I want it on letterhead, and I want it handwritten. And it's typing stuff. All right, next question.
Moving along, Andy Kokendorfer is up next from Viera, Florida. And Andy says, any thought of turning on the automated speech recognition for office hours live captions in Zoom? We've been there.
Go ahead, Carl.
So this is something we've spoken about, and we generally have agreed that we don't want it turned on because we don't want conversations being able to be recorded, because you can simply just copy and paste.
Well, there's 2 things there. Oh, is it in after hours, or this is office hours? The reason that we don't use it in office hours, we did experiment with it in one show, is because if you turn on the voice recognition or text, speech to text, it not only puts it in office hour, it not only puts it in Zoom, but it burns it into the YouTube stream. And it looks horrible. Like it is I don't know if we have the graphic for dumpster fire, but wow, is it bad? And so you can't turn, if you're going to use if you're going to stream to Zoom or stream to YouTube from Zoom or stream to anything, you cannot use the voice, the text, speech to text, because the presentation of it is unbelievably bad. And it's something that Zoom needs to work on. I haven't written anybody there yet about it, but what needs to happen is there's an HTTP input to YouTube. And what Zoom should be doing is sending that out via HTTP to that input. It doesn't need to do 608, 708. It just needs to send an HTTP input to YouTube, and then it would fix it, and then we'd all be happy, and we would use it every single show. But we're not going to use it while it's burning it into the video. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Actually, we had a theory on that after the show, and that was the host might have had the closed captions turned on for themselves. And since it's coming from the host's panel, that whatever the host has set is what is going to be. So if the host turns off the closed captions, it's possible that YouTube might not show it.
Maybe, but anyway, we're not going to do it.
It's something to test, yeah.
Either way, the proper way to do this is to send an HTTP input to YouTube, not to burn it into video. Ever. That should be an option. Burning into video is something you do at last resort. It's not that we've never done it. It's just that we do it really last resort. Next question.
Rupert McCrae here on the panel in Dallas, Texas is up again with beta programs have been mentioned recently. What beta programs has the panel had worthwhile experiences with? Please don't break any NDA.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
So to me, participating in a beta program is a pretty serious responsibility shouldering, because these are people generally, when they reach out to you and ask you to be on the beta team, who are looking for really high level feedback. So you really have to pay attention to what you're doing with the software, how it's interacting with everything. You have to document that and send it back and forth. I just know for a fact that I've talked to developers who run beta programs that getting a bunch of people doesn't really help them if those people just want the free software and aren't willing to participate actively in the community to make the software better. That's the point of a beta program.
Good, Sky.
I've been on various beta programs in the past with regards to most likely nonlinear editing, but the color software that has recently come out, what I'm observing is the direct interaction we're getting with engineers now. We didn't used to get a Zoom link and a Slack channel and or a Discord connection. And so again, we're talking about emails and phone calls, but there seems to be a lot more interactivity now than there used to be able to, especially with Slack.
I think the best beta program we have right now is Mukana. Like everybody gives feedback. That the developer talks to you guys. We put stuff in, then we take stuff out. We're like, oh, that didn't work, and we just kind of nug through it. The best one that I've ever been on, when I was at ILM, we were beta testers for Electric Image, and literally got a build every 3 to 4 days. So we would get a new build, but we were in perpetual beta. And basically the app between 1997 and 1999 were pretty much just all our requests. like it wasn't, I don't know if they did anything else other than what we asked for. You know, they were working on a modeling package and everything else, but it was great because we would ask for features. And the thing that I found that was necessary as a beta tester was I got almost all the features I asked for. Now, a lot of people didn't, because I wrote like things and put diagrams in and said, this is exactly how, this is where I want the button. This is how I want the button. This is what I want the button to do, you know, like, and this is why it makes a difference, you know. And if I explained those things in detail, I found that it was easy for a programmer to throw it in a couple of weeks. If I just said, this doesn't work, or I don't understand why this is doing this, it just went nowhere. Like as a beta tester, it went nowhere. When you were super specific about what you want, I think that one of the things that Apple does actually pretty well with a bunch of their apps that are not done well by most people is they have a feedback drop down in their menu. So if you open up Keynote or Motion or whatever, there's a feedback thing, and I'm pretty certain, because I've gotten responses at times, that they read them. And so that having feedback built right into the app, where I can just do a drop down and just write out a note like this isn't working or whatever. And you can't ignore most of the stuff if you have to. Like a lot of times they ask like 1,000 things about my OS, and I just ignore most of it. I mean, I go, this is the stuff that's important. This is because usually I'm making feature requests, not bug reports. So I think every app should have that, a way to just do feedback from within the app. I don't have to find a web page. I don't have to find something else. I can just drop down and say, here's your feedback. Go ahead, Aaron.
One thing I think a lot of this came out of yesterday. We in after hours Andy brought in the beta of Isadora with RTMP support, and then Luca from Isadora got on after hours and we were giving instant feedback, and then you know, they invited us to join the beta program as a result. And I think and
I would say, you know, I guess like to correct
I think that kind of
the best beta program that we have right now is with Liminal.
Yeah,
because we have a developer who's
with
watching
Andy
us
as well, right?
With Andy, with Andy, with Liminal, like we have him working actively on building code that is solving problems and working with folks here and answering questions inside of our Q&A and our chat and our Discord and everything else. It's probably the best beta program that we're currently in,
and now we're
best ever.
Getting into it with Isadora.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, John.
The coolest beta program I was part of is in the early 90s with our local LEC, which back then was called Centel, when they rolled out ISDN, and I was the Intel ProShare dealer, which was desktop video conferencing that ran over ISDN lines. 128K, and you get 320 by 240 at about 6 or 7 frames per second. It was a lot of fun.
It was like, this is amazing. Next question.
When video was postage stamps. David Brady is up next, and David says, regarding 1080 and return to office, does anyone have any experiences with on-prem Zoom connectors, media and zone, looking for real-world feedback, pros, cons, and thoughts of is it a viable strategy? Thanks.
Rupert.
So I looked into this, and I really would have loved for it to be supported under Hyper-V. The documentation is really focused around Oracle VMware, and that's where the support is. If you want to use it under any other platform, it's like best effort support from Zoom. So that's as far as I got with it, but I would have liked to have done it under Hyper-V.
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
I ran one for a while for my company, and it's fine. It works fine. There were no problems with it. The benefits, are, it's about security for you and what you feel like your security boundary is more than any sort of quality of service benefit. It works the same from a user perspective.
Yep. Go ahead, Rupert.
I think one of the main advantages is if you've got a whole load of people on a campus and they want to join a meeting, you don't have to pull down all that bandwidth for every participant. It'll come down once and it will be distributed locally by your room connector.
Yeah. Next question.
Sky Gleason here on the panel from Seattle. To demo iPad software usage, other than the screen, what camera angles would you like to see Terry Morgan demo for her Luma Touch software?
Go ahead, Carl.
So square onto the screen is best if you don't want to use it. So really the mouse being added to the iPad is really cool because now you have a permanent cursor there on the iPad. So you can actually just pump out the screen with the cursor there so people can follow you along. So using a mouse on the iPad, even though it won't, essentially you're just using it as a laser pointer essentially. But if you do want to actually shoot the screen and have someone's finger, have it square on. Try not to overlight what's there. So you don't really need to light. The iPad is itself lit, of course. Just have a little bit of side light on the hand that's there. So it's not a silhouette. But yeah, try to keep lights away from the screen.
For a lot of these, when I get set up to do those kind of point of view, I set the camera right over my shoulder. So I literally mount it, and I usually find a way to hang it so that literally if I lean my head sideways, it would knock into it. And so it becomes one of those things you kind of sit straight up and you're there. The cool thing about it is that whether you're showing how you're doing something, it means that your right hand is your right hand and your left hand is your left hand, and people have a view as if they were looking down, at it. Now, the only other way that I've done that, which is a little bit more complicated, is we put the camera, again, right over, and I've used a jib oftentimes for this, where we have a little jib that sits down and you can just kind of move it to wherever you need to be, and then we look up at the output from the jib. So the camera goes up into a monitor, and in that you're looking up and you get used to it. I know this will sound crazy, but you will get used to looking at the screen and moving your hands, and you'll get to a point where your vision of your hands, as long as it matches right, left, will be okay, for you to look there and you can just work looking up and out. And while Rupert answers the question, I'll try to find you an example of that. Go ahead, Rupert.
I just have a little box camera up here that I can pull down, and it's kind of looking just straight down at whatever I'm doing right in front of me here.
Yeah, and I'm going to try to, we'll come back to it. What are you going to say, Sky?
No, that was great. I'm just saying thank you because I'm going to be going down there and helping Terry set up as an editor in post-production. She's amazing. As a designer, she's phenomenal. As a presenter, it's a whole new world.
Yeah. And it's, and one of the things is that it is like getting that example of being able to do it. Here's a shot of, let's see if I can pull this over here. This is from years ago. So what you have here, we were doing a science explanation here. So you'll see that this is on a jib. This easy jib isn't very expensive, by the way. Now this is a red camera. That's expensive, or it was expensive at the time. And so it's coming straight down. Now I think we were between, we were showing a straight overhead, but she's basically looking out this way and then working with the stuff in front of her. And between this, what's nice about a jib is that you can make decisions. You can go, okay, I want it to be over the shoulder. I want it to be up here. And you don't have to do a big reset. And so while there's a little bit of an expense to getting the jib, once you have it, it's life-changing because it's just one of those things that you are able to reframe all the time for what you're trying to do. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'd say go back and watch some of the WWDC presentations. My cousin's works for Apple, and she rehearses like crazy. So I would say watch some of those, and you'll get some clues.
Yeah. If anyone's going to do it right with an iPad, it'll be Apple. So you can just take notes. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he says, Juan mentions bots attending after hours. How do you create said bots?
Go ahead, Aaron.
Tlaloc and I have been using Isadora, Tlaloc mostly, but I've been helping him to build these bots out of Zoom OSC, and creating. We're just putting the chat in a window so that people can see it when they're not looking at chat. But there's nothing really limiting to what you can do with them. But yeah, we're using Isadora. You could use anything you want. As long as you can talk back and forth to Zoom.
Next question.
Lucas Herzog in Mainz, Germany says, Alex mentioned an IFB that was cheaper than Audio Implements, but somewhat decent. He was actually wearing one that day. What brand and model was it?
I'm still wearing it. I broke something on my Audio Implements that I have to order the piece for, but I'm using my backup as my Auto. So this is just a little Auto IFB, and you can buy these on B&H, I think for $40 or $45. And this is the one we don't usually, for a long time, we didn't send the Audio Implements out because they're just more expensive. And so we had literally hundreds of these at one point. So, and they work fine. The older ones work better than the newer ones. The ones that are black with coils specifically, for some reason, aren't as loud. So we've now moved back to the Audio Implements. This is an old one, but so you have to be a little careful and be ready to. We're not sure what happened, but it seems like they saved money somewhere on this transmitter, not in a good way. So your mileage may vary on these compared to the Audio Implements, but mine works great, and this is what I've been using for the last week since I rolled a chair over my Audio Implements. All right, next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas, up next with, is the 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time link the only way for new office hours after hours participants to join Discord?
It is. That's the moment. Everybody's had to go through the gauntlet, which is they have to, wherever they are in the world, they have to show up at one point in time to join Discord. So it's kind of a rite of passage. For some people, it's easy. For people, not so much, but you still have to do it. All right, next question.
Eric Price of Leavenworth, Kansas, up next with, what are the panelists' thoughts on using a Zoom F6 field recorder to feed multiple mics into an iPhone for local candidate panels on Facebook Live?
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine because it's a class compliant audio interface. So that'll work perfectly fine if you can get it into an iPhone or an iPad. There's not much headroom, so depending on which mics you're using. So with those F6s, the headroom is pretty much dead on 60. So be careful like using an SM58 because you're going to be pushing it right up hard. So you may want to actually go with like a broadcast microphone, so which usually are around 50 dB sensitivity. But it should be perfectly fine for going into an iPhone for a live broadcast.
And go ahead, Courtney.
And turn on auto mix because it has a semi-decent auto mixer that will control levels, especially if you have a panel of 4 or 5 people and you don't know who's going to talk next and how loud they're going to talk. And it does a decent job of it's not a Dugan, but it does a decent job.
I will say that at some point we're going to reach a point where the candidates understand that they should probably invest in their office setup with both bandwidth and camera and mics. And once they do that, it would actually be easier to do the panels with them just coming out of their own offices and not put them in the same room. Because now you're dealing with an iPhone and you're dealing with the best mics you could do. Where if they all personally invested, every candidate running for anything, the first money that they should spend when they get money is on their webcam, like in their mics and their everything else, because this is the future of how people are campaigning. And it is stunning how bad our candidates, at least in the United States, are doing this. I mean, these are people who have million-dollar budgets, multi-million-dollar budgets for their campaign, and they come in on their built-in cameras on their laptops. It's embarrassing. It embarrasses me as an American that we have people that are so bad at this, and I had to spend months looking at it. And so they should grow up and stop being children and put, and have the real equipment and wear grown-up clothes, from a technical perspective. And so hopefully when they grow up and stop being children, technically, then what we should do is do the panels from their offices, because it'll be way easier to watch for everybody. Next question.
Danny
go ahead,
Law.
Guy.
Oops. Danny Law in Malaysia is up
No, go ahead.
next.
Wait, Guy, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, one last thing on the Zoom F6, you can get something called the F control, which is a control surface, which is super handy if you're doing a lot of those types of gigs, to be able to run those faders with bigger knobs, because those F6 ones are so tiny. So if you're doing a lot of these, I highly suggest getting the F control, because it makes life so much easier over time.
Next question.
Danny Law in Malaysia says, within a Zoom meeting, can you stream out multiple breakout rooms to YouTube?
Not with the built-in tools. so you can't, it's not built to do that. You can screen scrape it and stream it out. So you would have to have, and you could do that with Zoom rooms or some meeting inside of AWS. You could have hardware to do it. You could do a variety of different things, but you could put it on speaker mode or whatever you want, however you want to cut it. And the way we do that to do multiple breakout rooms is that we have a physical Zoom room in our office for each one of the meeting rooms. And then that Zoom room is able to go in and grab that footage. And so that's the only way to do it right now that I know of. Anyone else? No? Okay, next question.
Danny Law in Malaysia is back again with, is there a way in a Zoom meeting event to show the video of the translators together with the main presenters, for example, multi-spotlight within respective languages in a breakout room, or each breakout room a language?
The normal reason we would do that is to have an interpreter that is a sign interpreter that is not, that's the only interpreter that we would normally put on video to do that. In that case, we've multi-pinned them. We've also grabbed them as a separate feed. And if we're doing a produced broadcast, we will put it out. But it's not, you can do multi-spotlight to do that. Just remember that some of the outputs if someone's watching on the web, they won't see the multi-spotlight. So that's one of the problems. Go ahead, John.
I don't believe you can do spotlighting in breakout rooms yet. Still.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Rupert.
A way you could do it is just have everybody else mute their video, so you're just left up with the speaker and the interpreter.
Right. It's a difficulty. I mean, most of the time what we've done is we've taken it and we produced it. So again, we go back to those multiple rooms, and our sign interpreter is in a separate one. They're getting the audio, they're doing what they're doing, and then we're doing picture-in-picture in our switcher, and then feeding it back into Zoom to make that work. That's been the best looking version of that we found so far. And we did a lot of sign interpretation last fall, and it was pretty successful. Next question.
Tim McCulloch in Wichita, Kansas is up next, and he says, questions about accessibility for vision and hearing impaired users have been discussed in After Hours. Are we going to abandon accessibility and inclusion?
I don't know how we're abandoning it. That's, I don't know.
Alex, that was in reference to questions in the chat about the text being overlaid for the YouTube feed and the like.
Oh, yeah.
So, turning on closed caption for After Hours is not a good idea.
Yeah, we're not going to do that because it allows for recording. Yeah, so it's not possible. So it's just a limitation of how the system's set up. If there wasn't a way for us to, if it was if you couldn't copy and paste the text out, we would turn it on. But the fact that it can be copy and pasted is the reason that we won't turn it on ever. So it's just a non-record. It's not going to ever happen. Move on. Next question.
Tommy Schatz in St. Paul, Minnesota says, would it be possible to add a tab on the top of the Mukana to call up only first hour or second hour questions?
We have that. Oh yeah, we have that on the back end. So we can see that's why it's so important for us for people to tag it, because if you don't tag it, it just doesn't show up anywhere. And literally starting next week, we're not going to ask any questions. I mean, I'm trying to figure out exactly when, but starting next week, we're just going to ignore questions without tags. So so that you'll need to tag it, or you'll go, why didn't they ask the question? Well, someone will say, well, they didn't tag it. Go ahead, Carl.
I kind of like the front end view where it is mixed, because it allows me to upvote questions that maybe for the next hour as well.
Yeah, we don't do it for
the end of the hour and then go, oh, now I've got to vote everything.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. No, next question.
Okay, Stan Chan of Roseville, California. The tech industry has started to heavily invest in DEI efforts. Is the production industry moving in that direction as well?
DEI? All right, go ahead, Rupert.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's moving in that direction. so it's, you know, like that's the, you know, figuring out ways to include folks is the direction that everybody's going. Yeah. Next question.
Next question comes in from Vincent Alvarez in Bellingham, Washington. When I go to the Olympics 4K HDR channel, the picture is much sharper, but the overall image also seems a few steps too bright and way less contrast. Is this what I should expect with HDR? Is it normal to have to adjust HDR levels?
Go ahead, Carl.
It sounds like you have a 4K monitor, but you may not be able to, it doesn't have the flags for 4K, which means you're looking at 4K that's being re-represented on a 709 monitor. That's kind of what it looks like. You must have, like, I've heard
well,
that
if it looks really bright, that's usually not the case. Like if it looks really dull,
it'll be the
usually
curve
when
that goes weird. It's a curve that goes weird, not necessarily the bright. You still have 100 as 100, so, and it depends how they're broadcasting HDR, whether they're doing a good job of it as well. But they could be doing like a HLG. And HLG
yeah,
looks
I
really
have
bad
almost
either
no
way.
experience with HLG, so so that's probably the, yeah, I haven't worked with that at all. So I'm all in a PQ world where everything looks really drab. So it's usually for me, if everything looks like it's half lit, then it usually means that the monitor isn't seeing it correctly. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, if you look at HLG without an HLG capable display, it will blow out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
it's really weird, but yeah, it does it.
And a lot of production, is HLG because it's the easiest. You know, it's not the best. It's not even very good. Like it's like HLG is like 709 plus. You know, it's barely better than 709. And so I think that, but it's easy to run. If you're running in a truck, it's just easy to push through. We figured out ways on our end to do it better with PQ. And so we understand how to do that in a way that most trucks don't understand yet. We're working on documenting it. Next question.
Comes from Douglas Carmichael, and it's very audio specific synthesizers focused. Recently, I've been taking a strategy and focusing on one synthesizer at a time, my Electron Analog 4 Mark II, for example, and have found that I've been able to create surprisingly complete tracks from one box. Any strategies to rebuild inspiration?
Go ahead, Carl.
So take inspiration either from music you listen to, like just recreate the bass line from a song. Don't have to try to recreate the whole song. Just take the bass line or the lead from a song, and see if you can tonally, create that sound. So you can go manually create it yourself, and see if you can play it as well. You can program it into a sequencer if you're not, like, I'm not the best keyboard player, but I know how to program a sequencer and I know how to play along sometimes. But that's kind of the best thing to do, is just break apart a song and just play one part of that song and get it to sound the way you like it. It may not sound exactly like the recording, but the way you like it.
Go ahead, Bill.
So for me, inspiration seldom comes if I'm looking at work in my own field. Where I get inspiration is looking at other attendant fields. I remember in creating a video once, I went to an art exhibit and I got inspired by some of the things I saw on the walls of the gallery that worked into the work that I was doing in video production. I don't think if you're just looking at people who do what you do, I mean, hey, there's nothing wrong with trumpet players looking at other trumpet players and what they do. But sometimes when a trumpet player goes to a machine shop, they will hear things they would never have heard were they just staying in the music environment. And sometimes that can really spark unusual thought.
Go, Jeffrey.
I like to play with the dials. Even if I have it dialed in, I'll sit there and I'll take one to the one extreme, go to the other extreme to see if a new sound comes out of it, and I get an idea from that. Because sometimes it works while you're playing, sometimes it works while you're sleeping, and you wake up and go, hey, wait a minute, I turned that up to 75%. I like that sound now. So that's where I go with things like that.
Yeah, I like to take something that I don't have to think of. I reduce the number of variables that I'm dealing with at any given time, and then I just play with one variable or a handful of variables. We had talked about, I don't know whether it's on office hours or after hours. It's now become a big fog for me, but that I have gotten into using the iPhone ring, the little marimba ring. Well, I got the XML for that and I put it into Logic. And what I'm doing is playing with it with different instruments and different effects and different whatever. It's just something that does something, but it gives me a little musical thing, and it's something I know really well. So I know how it sounds, and you can sit there and play with it. And it's kind of amazing. And then you start layering it and playing with it. And what I'm learning is how Logic works. I'm not trying to learn how to make a new song. I'm just learning how Logic is operating and what these envelopes do and what this effect does and how it affects this. And because it's all MIDI, I can just change the instrument, I can change the process, I can change everything else, and just kind of sit there and noodle with it. And it tends to be how I do everything, is I just try to get something that's basic, and then I just tear it apart. The way I got into broadcast graphics was I just looked at HBO and a couple other companies, and I literally in Electric Image just rebuilt all of their graphics, from scratch. I would just sit there and like every little highlight, every little turn, everything else. I didn't show those to anybody. I just did them all internally. And the reason I did those was because I figured that would be the best way for me to know what I needed to know. And I learned more in 3 months than I'd ever learned in graphics, because to get it just right, if you really are paying attention to it in detail, you'd figure out, oh, that little highlight still isn't right. Oh, that isn't. And trying to hit it right on became, it took a lot longer than I expected. Go ahead, Courtney.
And if you have an analog synth, like he's talking about, and you haven't tried this, feed it through a cheap digital effects unit that does, chorus and flanging and reverb, and take the output of that and feed it back in if it has an external input, so that you can then feed it back through the same filters again in the analog synth, and you'll find some surprisingly new sounds.
Next question. Go ahead and say, Carl.
I'm just saying, so what Courtney described there was to go back out and come back in, like looping through. Me and Courtney both had a synth that actually does this internally, and it's a lot of fun.
Next question.
Comes in from Rupert McRae again. He says, Zoomtopia is next month. It's back again. Is everyone registered, and what are our expectations? The event will be held on Zoom Events. We have now seen this platform in action with Zoom Summer Academy. So does this give us some insight?
John?
They've got 1 month to get breakout rooms and webinars before Zoomtopia, where it was announced last year.
That's what always happens. It used to be when Blackmagic announced something, you knew it would ship by March of the following year, because you knew that Grant didn't want to show up at NAB explaining why he hadn't released a product so that he had announced it. So I think that Zoomtopia is the heat is on for Zoomtopia to solve that. I have to admit that I literally cannot watch virtual backgrounds. So Zoomtopia is kind of a dead in the water to me. Like people can tell me what happened, but I won't watch it, because my brain just completely melts down watching virtual backgrounds. And Zoom seems to be obsessed with them. Just like every person is going to be on something that makes me crazy. So I just kind of like, okay, just let me know how it goes. Next question.
Guy Cochran. Oh, this will be fun. He says, discovered that our local YMCA has a Zoom room. He came into after hours with it. Anyone want to see what they're using?
The YMCA has a Zoom room?
Yeah, it came out of my workout, and I was walking by, and these kids were kind of waving at this screen, and I look over and I'm like, holy cow, that's a PTZ. That's a nice PTZ. And I looked a little closer, and it was running Zoom, and it was this setup here. It was a Logitech Rally setup, which is pretty pricey when I looked how much it cost. I mean, the speakers, there's a little NUC-like PC, 2 microphones, a controller, and Paul, I logged into after hours. Paul Przykowski was on the other side, and I gave him camera control. He requested camera control, and he was in Florida controlling the Zoom room at the
What
Y.
What is it for?
Well, when I looked at the meetings that they had done, it was for teaching. So they were teaching gymnastics and volleyball and all these different sports from the Zoom room. So they were using it for classes probably during COVID, and still, because they were recent. They were from that day. And then it had an option to do 7 microphones. So these microphones, I later learned, were $350 a piece, beam-forming 4 mic arrays, but then you could add 7 of them. And then it had a remote control where you could be the presenter and you can mute, you could control the PTZ. So you could be doing a yoga move and grab the remote control and zoom in on that, or switch cameras from the remote. So really cool, but expensive. And Zoom rents these systems now. They call it hardware as a service.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's cool to get a glimpse into the future of, a community where you could just walk in and use the Zoom room, a
Right.
really nice one, because the Zoom room makes it HD, and then it's a 4K camera. You get good, well, the audio here was crap because the position of the microphones was on a table. And so I couldn't move the cable wasn't long enough, or I didn't pull on it hard enough. Maybe it does go to other parts of the room, but really cool technology to see it's a brand new Y. And that's probably because they had a Christie projector. I was like, wow, this room's it was super nice for a community center, but it was nice
That's
to get a
awesome.
glimpse into what the future could be.
It's a great website too. Like it's a really good setup. No, the website it describes what they do well. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, it looks exactly like if Zoom before pre-COVID, where the enterprise rooms for some of these companies are. But I'm not surprised on that YMCA's. I'm expecting libraries within the next 5 years to have fully functional Zoom conference rooms and individual rooms for those who who don't have a place to do their conferences, maybe interviews or anything like that.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but local libraries would be, you could do amazing things if there was with anything. I always look at if there is a large group of people, group of systems that you could turn on and connect, you could build massive events that are, bringing people together where they don't have to travel. Go ahead, Rupert.
On if you dig through Zoom's website, they actually have a lot of a range of pre-architected systems for different size facilities like that. They say, hey, this is what we recommend for 8 people, 20 people, whatever. And then they have a network of AV integrators or installers that will come install those things for you in that kind of setup. And if you follow those guys on, their social media channels, they'll have case studies of where they've installed these setups. Hey, look, we've done it here. We've done it here. These places are ready to come use.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Go ahead, John, and then John Preto, and then John Idelson.
So one of my friends just posted, there's a sports book here that's dark in one of the casinos, and they got all the screens up there, and then each desk has 2 screens on. I said, this would be a great room for virtual events.
Yeah, no, absolutely. John Idelson.
Well, pre-COVID, a lot of universities had what was called a one-button studio, started at Penn State. And it allowed faculty members to assign students to make a presentation, rehearse it. And so that's been very popular. Guy Cochran, they have one version of it, but I think you call something Matic. But what's really cool now is these one-button studios can be opened up to become a Zoom production studio.
By the way, the video conference, it's worth just checking out the Logitech site just to look at the way that they illustrate people using the conference room. It's just it's a really nice illustration. I know that that's not exactly what we're talking about, but wow, did they do a good job. And if you wonder why would you want to learn metahumans, which we're about to go into, think all those little people that I'm sure that they weren't using metahumans for this, but all of them could have been metahumans, and it would be a lot easier for you to do illustrations like this with a metahuman setup, even if you're just going to render stills or whatever, but with video and everything else. And so, but take a look at it because they just really crushed how to illustrate what's going on. That whole web page is just an incredible example. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas, back again with what are the latest impacts the panel is seeing from the global chip shortage?
Go ahead, Carl.
So the one thing we noticed in Australia, I'm pretty sure this is worldwide, the PlayStation 5 can't even be pre-ordered. So you go to like Sony Australia where you can buy stuff, or any retailer, you can't even pre-order on their website. It just says coming back online soon. And that's been the case for 9 months where you can't pre-order a PlayStation 5.
Go ahead, Aaron, real quick. We're going to move fast.
I've been trying to order a bunch of laptops. I have dug through 5 different resellers and split it up into 6 or 7 orders just to get them.
We talked about this on MacBreak yesterday. The most important word that was said in the entire Apple shareholders meeting was legacy. The fact that they mentioned chips being legacy chips means that Apple's going to get rid of all of them. Like Apple's not going to use any of these chips much longer. And I'm not sure if this is the catalyst or they were already going that direction, but my guess is by 2023 you won't see any external chips other than what Apple makes. Go ahead, John, and then Jeffrey real quick.
I'm just amazed how many people want to buy used cars from me.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, if you want to get a newer video card, you actually have to buy the whole system to actually get the video card out and part it out.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, a commercial space company, NanoRacks LLC, transmitted a classical piano recording to the International Space Station to become an NFT. How are NFTs created? And wouldn't you need to downsample the audio to fit with the ISS's restricted bandwidth?
We're going to do a whole second hour on NFTs. I'm just trying to organize who's going to talk about it. I think it takes a life of its own. And there's actually pretty good bandwidth to the space station. You could put up a pretty high quality signal, probably as high quality as that they would be able to hear. Go ahead, John.
So Chris and I created NFTs for the lower thirds this weekend, and the problem with the NFTs right now is the minor fees. So we create, a $2 lower third, and it's $50 for the minor fees. So that's a problem. They're trying to work around that right now, but right now it's a problem.
It was $40 for me to sell it and $50 in mining fees for him to buy it.
It's
a totally broken system through that website. It might be different to a different site, John. Is that possible?
You still got to pay minor fees no matter where you go. So that's the problem. But they've got a new system that they're going to install. They've been talking about it. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah. Next question.
Robert Shoji in Los Angeles says, what lav mic is sportscaster Mike Trico using?
I think, this is Olympics production. That's my bad. Let's go to the next one.
Craig Kadoki, where did Alex find the Marimba XML?
I'll put it up on Discord in the after hours discussion or whatever. But I just searched iPhone, iPhone Ring, like iPhone Ring XML, and you'll pop it up. And someone put it up there as an XML and a music XML, and it imports in as the XML into Logic, and Logic just immediately popped in, and it was there, and it was as good as MIDI. So, and it works perfectly. So it sounds exactly, when you set Marimba in Logic and you have that file, it sounds exactly like your phone. And then after that, you just keep changing. And like my wife works at a meditation center, so I'm looking at using Tibetan bells instead of the marimba. Give it to her for her phone just for fun. So you can do a lot of fun stuff with it, but I'm using it to play around with remixing and also playing around with Atmos. It's just kind of a reference. I decided to use that as a reference sound that I can use for lots of things. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next, and it says, in the classical piano in space example, the pianist in question was Wing Chong Kam, a Hong Kong-based pianist. Why could many top classical musicians come out of Asian countries, and how would they have recorded in a concert hall in a COVID-safe manner?
Go ahead, Carl.
Practice. So it's true in every culture. There are people, but in certain cultures, practice, makes perfect. But it's seen as a virtue to practice. In other cultures, going outside and playing can be a virtue for young people.
I think for a lot of us, I think that anybody who watches a musician who is excellent at what they do, or a sports figure, an athlete, it's hard to picture how many hours go into becoming excellent at a physical thing. And I think that we vastly underestimate that when we watch something and give them any comments. Like, I always love it when people like some guy will be sitting there at a bar. We always call it a guy in a diner. Some guy sitting in the bar saying what Ben Roethlisberger should do. Like he's been there. Sorry, but it's the same thing when you watch the Olympics. Like, oh, that person wasn't very good at that. I'm like, really, because I couldn't do any of those things. So we just have to remember that it's just an incredible talent. When you see someone who's a great musician or a great artist there are thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of work that gets them to that point. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Chris. Pretty quick, we're running.
Yeah, over. And if you are part of any major university, whether you're a music major or not, you can actually get rooms, and you can sign up for rooms. You can sign up for concert halls. You can rent concert halls, and be able to do recording on that. I don't know how that's going to work with the post-COVID area, but pre-COVID, you could do that all the time.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris, and then we're going to move on.
To exemplify how much these people practice, we were talking about it this weekend. At the Olympics, they should have a lane like in the pool where just like a normal dude is swimming, or like after Simone Biles goes and flies through the air, like John Prado should go out and do a few somersaults so you could see what like a normal person looks like.
You know what they should call it? They should call it banana for scale.
Yes.
we should have done that. How did we miss the opportunity to do banana for scale? Like that should be a whole show where the whole show is called banana for scale. For those listening, is a Reddit term that a lot of times people put photos and you'll put a banana somewhere in the photo, just going banana for scale, and so. But banana for scale would be such a great show because it would just be like the person we would just call he or she the banana, and they'd go out like. So you want to like I this is the shock that I had when I went from high school baseball to Penn State was those pitches are coming in really fast and they actually know how to curve like curve really curved. It didn't just kind of like do something funny, and it was coming in. The difference between difference between low 80s and low 90 miles an hour was a lot. And I was I could barely hit it across field. And so. So it's I think that would be really such a great show. It's kind of like Dirty Jobs, but for just like when you look at like Todd playing the violin and just someone come out like I just tried to play and it would be
the Olympics would be so much more interesting if you saw how put your kid out skateboarding next to these Olympic.
Oh my gosh.
It would just be. It was
the 100-meter
wow.
dash would be the funniest one because you have to wait for a while. Oh, here they're finally coming, and they get to the end and they're like.
Yeah, and here comes Sky Gleason finishing up the 200, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't think I'd survive the 400. Go ahead, Stuart.
Just like to point out two things. First to Chris, for some people, it is their kid out there on the skateboard.
Yeah.
And well done for them. But just a little bit of trivia set back to the 70s and 80s. There used to be a competition called Sportsperson of the Year, where they used to invite people from all different sorts of sports to compete in physical challenges to decide who was the healthiest and strongest and fastest. They dropped the event after the Formula One drivers kept winning it repeatedly.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a funny thing. All right, we're shifting gears.
Nobody does Formula One.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't think we would do that. I don't think we would do the banana for scale with a Formula One car. We did one little. I think we've told the story. We did when we put a press person in the second seat with Mario Andretti, and we thought it'd be a great conversation while they're going around Sonoma Racetrack, and all we heard them just scream and swear was pretty much all we got out of the car. It's like you hear the G's, and that was it. Go ahead, Courtney, and we'll move on.
Yeah, Chris, you may have missed it, but I saw a local news story. There was a couple that decided they were going to put on Facebook or on YouTube. They participate in all the Olympic events themselves, a husband and wife, and they're middle-aged, punchy, they look like us. And, for the high hurdles, they had hurdles that were about 6 inches high. They jumped over them.
The funniest one, we'll move on after. The funniest one was
this is Olympics.
The woman who gamed the system and was in the Winter Olympics, and she figured out how to get just enough points to get in. And she basically, it was like slalom, but she just goes up and back and back. It was like this weird, very weird way of doing it, but she had figured out a way to get just enough points to become an Olympic, it became a big controversy that she did it, but she, it was a really interesting, like she had figured out the math, to actually get in. And she had some skill, but not Olympic skill. So anyway, all right, changing gears, we're running a little over. And a reminder to folks, when we run over, generally if we have less than 2 votes, we're going to just knock those out and move on to the next thing. So we're now going to jump in. What we thought we'd do is we talk a little bit. We've got a ton of questions, so we're just going to jump into the questions themselves. And then I've got a couple videos we can show and kind of dig through once we get through the questions that I grabbed from this morning's broadcast. One of the great things about YouTube TV is that you can play it on a browser, and if you can play it on a browser, it means you can record it on QuickTime. So I've got a couple examples that we can take a look at. It's the only reason I have YouTube TV is so I can do this. So all right, so let's go ahead and jump into the questions, Bill.
Sure. The first one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, how was Dolby Atmos mixing handled with the lack of Dolby certified rooms on site? Can mobile trucks be certified by Dolby for Atmos mixing?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
As far as I'm aware, it's 5.1. That's what they're doing. They may be locally, but I don't know of anything that's being streamed back to either the US, Europe, or Australia that's actually more than 5.1. It could be just folded down. Dolby, if they are doing Atmos in Japan, it could be folded down to 5.1. It definitely will be folded down to 5.1.
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
So for Dolby Atmos broadcasting, you don't have to have a certified room. You have to have certified equipment to do it live. There's an authoring tool and an encoder that you have to do Dolby whatever, and you can do it live. I mean, but it's essentially a 5.1 mix with objects added, but they're not dynamic. So you have to place them and they stay there.
Yeah, it's just a matter of identifying it as Atmos. So you can put a 514, for instance, you can put a 514 mix into an encoder and have it repackage it where it looks like Atmos. It's not going to have animated objects. It's just going to have the channels that go out there. So that's, and I think they're not doing 514. I think they're just doing 5.1 as it was stated before. Go ahead, Rupert.
There's a article on the Sports Video Group website about this. I'll just post a link in Mukana.
That's great. Next question.
Lucas Herzog in Mainz, Germany says, how does the delivery from the world feed to the national broadcasters typically handled? And how do commentators in different language tie into that?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
So I've spoken a lot about bent pipes for the Australian feed, so I thought I may show what that actually looks like.
You want to define a bent pipe for someone?
So a bent pipe, on this image, so I'll show on this image, the first two, the top left and the one next to it, you'll see 7 in red and 7 in blue. Those two are the curated Australian channels, and they are also free to air. So you'll also get those in terrestrial broadcasts, but they're also being streamed live as well. All the rest of the channels here, with the exception of the 2 down the bottom around the middle, which are the official Olympic channels, which are also bent pipes, are actually bent pipe feeds, which what that means is the OBS, which is the Olympic Broadcasting Service, will deliver feeds to the International Broadcasting Service, which is where all like NBC and Channel 7 here in Australia are. And they can choose to take those feeds, they can choose to record them, and they can choose to repackage them in a way like NBC is doing it and Channel 7 does for some stuff here in Australia. But with us, we're kind of lucky where they've got this app, which is free to us. And essentially, as you can see, that the vast majority, 90% of the ones you can see here, are bent pipes. So they're actually taking that feed they're getting into Channel 7 and just sending it straight out again, untouched. There's no Australian commentary on it. So the athletics has an American commentator. The gymnastics actually has Australian commentators, but that just happens to be what OBS, so just 2 Australians are doing that. And the swimming has usually 1 American and 1 New Zealander, I believe. So it's just English-speaking people who know a lot about this that particular sport that OBS have hired to be the actual commentators for those sports. And I kind of like that because they don't add any kind of local flavor sometimes. If you want the local flavor, you can switch over to the other ones. So if you want the life story and their family. But they actually speak more about the athlete themselves and where they've come from. So whether in the last Olympics, have they had any troubles? And they'll also speak to the technique or the skill base that's required for that particular sport. And I kind of like that in the bent pipe method, which means OBS through Channel 7's app straight to me with no kind of Australian fluff.
Go ahead, Marty.
For most of the countries outside of the US, which pays way more money for the rights, there's a setup in each of the venues with a control room that sets up booths in the stands for all of the rights holders' countries. And at each booth, there's microphones, monitors, headphones, and a feed to an edit room in the International Broadcast Center, which is the huge complex that's on site that all of the countries have edit rooms, and they get all the video feeds that are produced by the Olympic Broadcasting Service. So in each of these booths at each of the venues, the commentators, the color commentator for that country, has their own dedicated space that they can go in and do the commentary. And in the control room that's in the venue, they send all those signals back to the Olympic Broadcast Center.
Go ahead, Doug.
So I have a friend who is an EIC for Mobile TV Group, and his production truck is parked in Bristol, Connecticut. And he is receiving, I think, 16 feeds just for beach volleyball. So men and women's beach volleyball. And then his truck, which is in a compound of lots of trucks, that are just receiving signal, and then his truck is just producing on site just the men and women's volleyball, just for the U.S.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, he showed me behind the scenes. It's crazy, the setup.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, this is precise. This commentary stuff is exactly what Mickey and Tucker have been doing. They've been setting up these booths, and I was just trying to look up the number, but it's an incredible number of crew people that are involved doing. It's like hundreds of people that just have to set up these commentary booths to do all the alternate languages. And if you ever get a chance to work on the Olympics, you should probably take the opportunity, because it's a huge learning curve.
Aaron?
OBS hires 4,600 people just for the games. Another thing that's happening a lot more now because of COVID is remote commentary. That happened before, but it's more so now. So those commentary booths a lot of times are more empty than normal, but they'll get the feeds back like Doug was talking about, and then add commentary on top at the other end.
Right.
And I know Telemundo, a friend of mine works there. They've done all of their commentary that way. They didn't send anybody to the Olympics other than NBC people, which they can send custom feeds back from NBC.
The funny thing is that the streams are all slightly different speeds too, depending on what pipeline they go through. We were watching FIFA had the World Cup was on. I was working at an event in Moscone, and we were during a break. It was like a 2-hour break, and people were watching it, and you could hear the cheering come across on a score because different people were seeing it a couple seconds. It was over like 20 seconds. You'd hear it cascade because of the different pipelines that they went through. Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, so it's been a few years, but I was commentary manager at a few Olympic Games, and the Olympic Broadcasting Service, they have this remarkable program where years before the actual event, they will recruit students from universities in the countries and train them, right? And so when I get to the venue and I have to start setting up all these booths, they give me a crew of these prior trainees to work with, and it was an incredible experience to work with these.
They've gotten really good at it.
Yeah, they learned the equipment, and we all set it up according to plan, and they did really well.
Hold on, Joe. Yeah, Joe, we'll add you. I didn't want to put you on the spot. Joe Wasser's like, hey,
Joe Wasser here.
Yeah, Joe.
Hey,
Joe. Yeah, Joe, just raise your hand. We'll bring you in. Joe is assistant manager of the dot commentary for OBS. So and I think he might be coming in from on site. Let's add Joe. that would be a good thing. So I didn't want to put anybody who's on site on the spot. But Aaron, you got to add Joe. And Tucker. Yeah, okay. Now we're talking. Literally.
The band's getting back together.
Yeah, let's go straight from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, no, you gotta bring him in. You gotta add him, Aaron.
I just did.
Okay.
Tucker's got his hand raised too in the main thing.
Hey guys. I don't know. We can't hear you. I don't know if you guys are able to turn the mics on or not.
Can't hear or see.
If you need some help with audio, we can give you some input.
Joe's made it.
We know some.
There you got me.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, we got you.
And we can hear you. You're good.
How's it going? What time is it there?
It's 19 minutes after midnight.
Okay, and you guys are here. Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us. And what part of Tokyo are you in?
I don't even know what it's called.
Okay.
I'm in my apartment.
Right. It's the place that you go to get the bus to go to the place.
Yeah. So forgive me. It's weird. I'm having audio problems. I was trying to put on my earbuds. So forgive me. I'm just talking straight on my laptop. So
So
Yeah,
you
I
heard
got
us
back to my
talking. We were all guessing, and you probably be able to give us more information.
To be honest, I was going a little crazy.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned the broadcast training program. I also run that for OBS now. Also, train the students. Crew numbers just within the commentary department. I want to say we have about 200 people that are working on the commentary systems. So, I don't know. Ask me any question. I'll see what I can do for you. And like I said, I'm commentary specialist. I don't know the video side. I just know the fringes of it.
How many, we'll get the video, but how many booths are you setting up or are you managing?
Last I checked, we had 665 that were equipped.
Wow.
And then there's also probably, this is just a guess, somewhere around another 150 across, all the venues that are unequipped, meaning they'll have an internet drop and they bring in some kind of IP codec and work from that or some other system.
And for yours, do you have a pretty standard setup for each one of those booths? So they're all pretty much the same? Hey, Mickey.
When we run an equipped position, yes, it's the commentary unit, what we call a CIS terminal. It's the commentary information system. That's where the rights holders get all their information on the athletes, the schedule, even the weather forecasts. And then
is that a metadata feed or is that a video feed? How do they get that?
They're in on laptops. They're and I don't know this stuff. Like I said, I'm strong commentary, but they're laptops, with a basic internet connection.
Right.
So they can change, not everybody's looking at the same thing. They can change what they want.
Right.
And then there's also an IP-based CATV system that provides the feeds, and you can only watch what is at your venue. You can't see what's going on at other venues. You can just see what you're doing at your venue.
Interesting. Is that just a security issue or is that
It's a financial issue because you don't want somebody coming to water polo and commentating on tennis.
Right. Because they paid for access to water polo.
Yeah, because we have to. It obviously costs money to build all these systems. So we have to limit what they can do.
What mics do they have? Are they using for those? Are these headset mics or?
Yeah, we're using Bayer. Forgive me, I don't know the model number. Maybe Tucker, one of the guys, remembers. But we're using Bayers with electrolytic mics in most venues. We actually had a little bit of RF interference at some venues and went to an AKG dynamic that we've used at others.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I just want to say that Joe sent me an almost 60-page PDF instruction manual that is did you put that together, Joe?
I did the revision on it. Yeah.
It's spectacular. And it's basically like, welcome to the Olympics. This is what you're going to be doing. This is the scale of it. These are all the terms there's a whole glossary in the beginning. You're going to hear all these acronyms, TLAs, 3-letter acronyms, and photos and explanation of it. And I got to say that if you're thinking about onboarding people to a repeatable task, it's an amazing way of doing it, because I read through it. I'm like, oh yeah, you don't want me. You should hire Mickey. How's Mickey working out for you, by the way?
All three guys are doing excellent.
Awesome.
We've got Brian, Tucker, and Mickey, and it's just been great. So
yeah, absolutely. And go ahead.
I would say, if I can, a little bit on the broadcast training program, because that's something OBS is very proud of.
Yeah.
And it's something I really enjoy too. For Tokyo, I came here in 2019, and I believe we had 4 weeks worth of classes. Each session was 6 days long, and the 6th day was the final exam that we gave them. So we trained 4 different groups while we were here for that month.
And how many did you train?
Probably around 400.
Right.
Maybe a little bit less than that.
And that was just for the commentary.
Yeah.
For your portion, because they're doing it that for everything, right? Or many things.
Yeah, it's a legacy program. OBS refers to it as a legacy program, and it's something we're really proud of. And it is, to me, it's amazing the kids, if I may say, that that end up going into broadcasting, that get their feet wet in this and really enjoy it. And
I've talked to folks in other countries where that's happened, and they said it revolutionized their sports coverage. Like it was like that was the seed that when the Olympics came through, it changed how X hundreds or thousands of people do it. And then that just ripples out to the rest of the, basically the entire industry changes on how they're covering things and how they're doing it because they've, obviously the Olympics have figured out how to cover, how to cover this. Like
something of size. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We saw a lot of that in Brazil. There's been a big change down there after those games.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What have been the biggest challenges?
Boy, it's weird. And I know it sounds cliche, but every games kind of has their own. Here, dealing with COVID precautions was a big issue.
Right.
We had everybody came in, was isolated for 2 weeks, and just the challenges of that. But otherwise, the venues were in pretty good shape. It was just a matter of that time limitation, and the cautions that we had to take.
Yeah. Marty.
So well, the last time I did commentary was in Salt Lake. And at that time, we were using some really pretty old equipment for commentary that was basically a rack of switching gear. And we had to connect up analog phone lines, 25 pair dry phone lines from each venue back to the IBC. What are they using now to for communications to transport each of the audio from all of the booths in the venues back to the IBC now? Is it more IP based?
Yeah, the system you're talking about, we're 2 generations past that now. My first Olympics was in Atlanta, and we used that same system there. But we're running Cat5 from the commentary units back to the CCR, the commentary control room.
What's the protocol?
That's I knew you were going to ask that. It's an IP-based system. We're actually using 2 commentary systems here. One made by a company called AEQ that's out of Spain, and another one by Lavo. And they're each using their own slightly different versions. What I can tell you is that from the commentary control room back to the International Broadcast Center is all on MADI streams. But and the connection between the commentary unit and the CCR is a little bit hybrid because we're also controlling the unit through there. So besides just audio passing, there's a lot of control that happens.
What have been the challenges? What are the things you're noticing? We'll open some questions. We're going to jump into a couple questions here from the audience or from the producers because we shifted gears real quickly when you guys showed up. So
sorry
No, not at all. No, I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to put you guys on the spot. So it was kind of like, it'd be really great if these guys were here when we talked about it. But I didn't expect you to actually show up. So anyway, jump in and let us raise your hand if there's something that is applicable. We'll cut through these questions relatively quickly, kind of as we go through them. Let's go to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next, which says, how does OBS hire technical staff? Do they mostly hire directly, or do they hire through vendors like NEP and staffing agencies?
I don't know, Joe, if you want to jump into that one.
Yeah, that's we hire directly, and we really pull from the people we used last time. There is a department that receives CVs and resumes, for the holes we need to fill, but we're very reliant on the past crews that we've had because it's such a unique situation.
Right, just save a lot of time. So you're just adding the people with attrition or people that didn't work out perfectly well, you move on, but for the most part, you probably have a lot of overlap. Would you say it's like 80-90% overlap from one to the next?
Yeah, probably closer to 90%.
Yeah.
This game had a challenge, though. There were some people that didn't want to come over, so we had far fewer experienced people, but we still did okay.
Right. Next question.
Down to the very granular questions here today. What lav mic is Mike Tirico using?
This is from Robert Soji in Los Angeles. Lav, we don't know what lav he's using. Do we know are there specific lavs that are used? No.
I don't know. We don't use anything like that in the commentary department. We're just using headsets.
Right. Yeah, they looked. Yeah, go ahead, Tucker.
I think it's going to depend on the truck. So each venue has a supporting truck and kit that comes in, and so it's going to be, some of those trucks come in from various different countries and things. So it's probably going to just depend on what that truck particularly uses.
Yeah, Mickey.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing, and that includes a lot of the cameras and also whatever comm system they're using at each venue. It depends on the truck.
Interesting. Yeah, I was looking at it earlier. We'll have to take a look at it again. In a glance, going by, it looked like DPAs. They're cardioids, but it may not be. Next question.
Jason Sipes in from Marietta, California. And Jason says, what percentage of production is being done on-site versus off-site?
I guess Joe.
For what OBS does, the production happens on-site. TV trucks are brought in. It's a very conventional type of sports television production, but then it's brought back to the IBC and distributed from there, where each rights holder may add whatever it is that they want to do to the feed.
Yeah. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's in back again with how much of the Olympic production backbone is IP based and how much is SDI? I know NBC talked about their all 2110 plant, but is there a strategy to migrate to all 2110 for future games?
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
So what I read is that it depends on the truck. Like Tucker was saying, the trucks at the stadium are all 2110 and Sony cameras, and elsewhere it's various things, right? So just depends on the truck, but the plant itself is 2110.
I have heard that the next Summer Olympics will be all 2110. That's the rumor. Next question.
Ty Cochran, longtime panelist here in Seattle. How does counterbalance work in events like trampoline to make camera operation appear effortless?
I don't know.
Here's the image as well for those of you that want to see this guy effortlessly, not even having to manhandle. I'd imagine a 90-pound person could.
I mean, I don't know if that's as much counterbalancing as just centering the camera. So, as you know, I mean, Guy, you probably know this better than I do, but as you get a heavy camera like that, you've got a lot of weight and you've got a really long plate. And what we do is we turn the tension I turn the tension on the tripod all the way to 0. And then I just pull it back until it's literally just sitting there on its own without any kind of tension at all. And then I usually tighten that tension up to where where I'm happy with it. With a high-end, head that's going to be $8,000 to $10,000 and above, you're not going to have that first, the biggest problem you get into is the first couple degrees on a cheap head. So when you don't pay a lot, you're like, oh, I don't need an expensive head. The problem really is almost every head under $5,000 will have a little bit of give in the first 2 or 3 degrees. And the expensive heads won't have that. They'll just be where they need to be all the time and have the right tension. So you turn that tension up a little bit. And for something like that, you're just going up and down, but you start adding that tension to give it weight, and so that you're not jittering and back and forth. But the balance there to make that work is to balance that head. And it's important not only for operation. If you have smaller heads with heavy cameras and they're unbalanced, they'll literally start to bleed. They'll bleed all the fluid out of them. So you have to be, the balance also is really important for the longevity of the head, which will last forever if you don't screw it up. Go ahead, Courtney.
And one secret to all is, of course, all the good heads have spring tension to counter the center of gravity issue. And the best way is to lower your center of gravity below the tilt angle of the head. So if you've got batteries and stuff, don't mount them high above the tilt angle, mount them low, and that way the camera will have a tendency to level out if you take your hands off of it when the tilt locks and the drags off. So if you have a big viewfinder on the top, that makes it very top heavy. So the amount of tension has to change the more you tilt. So try and lower your center of gravity always.
Yeah. Next question.
Comes from Douglas Carmichael. How is audio transported on the Olympic production backbone? Is it mostly Dante Ravina based? What audio mixing or routing platforms are being used?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
The closer venues are all coming in on MEDI through fiber. The more distant venues, we're using Ravenna.
There you go. Next question. Oh, can't hear you. Can't hear you, Bill.
So I'm sorry. Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas asks, what lessons in production will be learned from this Olympics that will be taken forward to the 2022 Winter Olympics?
Are you guys walking away with anything that you're like, okay, Joe?
Yeah, I can tell you not much is going to change. The turnaround is too short.
Right. It's only a year. It's funny. It's funny when you start getting into big productions like this, you're like, it's only a year away. It's practically, it's on top of us.
It's not even yeah, we're equipment is going straight from here to Beijing.
Wow. Yeah. Go ahead, Tucker.
When he says equipment, think building the size of a football stadium is being torn down and immediately moved.
Right.
The IBC itself is being torn down and moved and put back together exactly like it is.
Wow. So you think, I guess, Joe, you think more in like how many, like maybe the next Summer Olympics is the update, not so much the it's like every other one.
Yeah, it's and it's a little bit backwards. Usually we like to make changes at the Winter Games because it's less than half the size.
Oh, interesting.
But so so I don't know. I'm not sure we even know exactly how things will change for Paris. But with what Tucker said, talking about moving things, I can tell you before I was in the job I am now, I used to be the warehouse manager for the commentary equipment.
Mm-hmm.
All of OBS's equipment. I know in Rio, we had 220 cargo containers of OBS equipment and supplies and things.
Right.
So it is a pretty massive operation to be moving.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I've been thinking, and I'd like to get Joe's thoughts on this as well, with what was being mentioned earlier in the show about a lot of commentary happening remotely, not on site. I'd be interested to know like what Joe has been seeing in terms of this move. I'm sure you've been seeing it grow more and more popular in the past few years. Yeah, curious about that.
It's interesting because I think the big factor in that it's something that COVID is teaching us. Before I did the warehouse, I did Olympic Stadium, and in Athens we had 118 broadcast positions, and in Beijing we had 128 broadcast positions. Here, because of COVID, those numbers are down. So it's really going to be interesting. We don't know. We're going to have to see how it's affected in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Aaron Helsledge is in next. And he actually, this is an interesting question because most of us think of the Olympics as an every 4 years things. And he's wondering, how much time, Joe, do you spend on Olympics work versus other things? Or is this full-time for you?
No, for me, it's I'm a contract person. I'm a freelancer that comes in. Before Tokyo, I probably worked about 2 or 3 months at home, doing different things. I came here, my plane landed here April 28th. And that's when I started going full time here. In between, I work on other world feeds. I do stuff for Super Bowl and NBA Finals, World Series, things like that. So I pick those up in between the Olympics. But OBS does have a pretty large full-time staff that just is doing it constantly because it's every 2 years,
Yeah. Do you think has it been easier to have it every 2 years or harder?
Oh, based on how difficult it's feeling trying to do this in Beijing at the same time, You know, because I'm old enough, I can remember when they did winter and summer in the same year.
Right.
And that had to be a brutal experience. It's much easier when they're every 2 years. The logistics and the technological aspects can be handled much easier.
Yeah.
Will you be going straight to Beijing from there, or are you gonna?
There's
no time, right?
Well, I'm gonna hope my wife is not watching this, because I think I'm gonna have about a month at home. I'm doing the Paralympics. I'll land like September 8th or 9th, and I think I get about a month at home before I go to Beijing.
Yeah. Next question.
Peter New of Stockholm, Sweden says, are the Tokyo 2020 games using more Japanese tech? Will Paris games in 2024 use more European tech? And or to a little degree, 5G is definitely marketed, but is it being used for something there? He also wants to know.
There's a lot of questions. We'll just pick one. You gotta ask the questions, and they're especially when they're diverse. Go ahead, Joe.
The technology really is the same from games to games. You know, there really isn't Japanese tech or European tech. Although I will tell you, the one thing that I find unique is that the Olympics is run on 220, 50 hertz. We run on European power. Japan is 100 volts. We outside the IBC, we have numerous large generators to generate all the electricity we need. So that's, you know, it stays the same to the point that we're generating all our own power.
Interesting. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Sky Gleason in Seattle. Volleyball seems to have the most double punch in the video switcher. Any reason why that might be?
And I was educated that double punch is not exactly what I was. I misquoted that. So I just see a lot of flickering of missed edits. And again, I know the heavy lifting that's going on behind the scenes. It just surprised me, but it's amazing what I'm seeing. But I'm seeing a lot of flicker of extra missed edits.
With some sports, I mean, I haven't done the Olympics, but I've cut a bunch of sports, and some sports are very predictable and some sports are not predictable. You know, so it's you know, so what you're cutting to becomes harder or harder or easier depending on what you can expect. You know, and I think that's usually one of the big key factors is when there's a lot of places it can go, it's hard to get it right. Go ahead, Chris.
I suppose it's at least possible that it's just a bad TD who's like Sky's
level
comment.
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
I mean, you would hope not, but it's possible. Sometimes, you know, again, I mean, Joe could talk to this. If it was harder to find people that wanted to travel to do this, they might be, you know, lower down the roster.
Could be, Joe.
I don't know in particular what's happening with volleyball. Believe it or not, I've seen hardly any of it on TV. But I can tell you one of the things that they do is like NBC is helping to produce the golf. The BBC does tennis because they do Wimbledon. So they bring in crews that are experienced with the sport to to hopefully make things better and easier and not have the learning curves. But for volleyball in particular, I don't know.
Right, Carl.
Yeah, so countries can ask for camera feeds so they can cut it themselves. So you can either have the world feed coming out of OBS and OBS managers who's doing that cut, or you can actually get camera feeds from the venues as well. But you have to pay for that, I guess.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian. Can't hear you. Can't hear you, Brian. Okay. All right, next question.
Next question comes from Dave Chalmers in Glasgow, Scotland, and he says, if you have seen the bullet time multi-camera effect used at the Olympics, for example, sport climbing, what do you think, gimmick or useful?
I haven't. Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
So this thing has always kind of, I don't know, I've always felt like they've just used like webcams. I know they're not webcams, but it's a processing power that they're doing in the background for these cameras. So I understand there's limitations, and I understand how much effort needs to be put into that particular one system versus all the other cameras on site, and you'll need to put in as much effort to that one system to all the cameras, let's say for gymnastics. I understand that it's a humongous amount of computing power to do the replay within 30 seconds. I understand that too, but I always feel that there's always been this missed opportunity that there's an option there for a third-party company to develop a system that just works like a turnkey solution that they can just deliver to OBS and say, here's what we've got. Let us know if this meets your standards. And it can get a lot better. You can because at the moment it's almost VGA quality.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of the broadcasts that utilize the bullet time setup. I think like with anything, it must be used in moderation. There might be times where it's used too often. There might be times where there was like a cool kick flip or whatever trick move in skateboarding where it could have been used, but it wasn't in the right spot. So, everything in moderation.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I saw a great overlay where they think about gymnastics, the vault. You know exactly where the action is going to be. And they did an overlay of two people doing a similar vault. And you could absolutely see, oh, this one is much more straight. This guy's a little cockeyed. And to see them compared that way was very interesting.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of room to grow here. I mean, not in a bad way, but in like there is so much the technology can do at this point that it's going to be really exciting to see it keep on moving down the path. Go ahead, Aaron.
So Intel makes that system, and it's evolved a lot over the last few years. I think it looks terrible, and it looks like a total gimmick to me. But it doesn't add anything.
The hard part is resolution, and as we get to 8K sources, and you have a lot more to work with. I think that at HD quality or at 4K quality in a wide shot, which is a lot of times what they're using because they can't move it, so they have to capture the whole piece of it. At least the ones that we've used, that you end up with a very low resolution to work with, and sometimes they're actually just doing frames between the cameras as opposed to generating 3D geometry. But that 3D geometry is difficult. The funny thing is that we've been joking that we might be able to produce a better system, not for the Olympics, but for capturing people with a bunch of iPhones, because they're generating within 30 feet, they're generating LiDAR information that can help us sync that. But being able to do it in real time, there's a whole bunch of things there. Quality versus time versus, everything else makes it, being able to do a replay, and Sony's done a lot of work in this area, and being able to replay it and be able to process it. At least the Sony system that I saw was like a refrigerator. Like it was, processing, like it was like this giant refrigerator full of rack full of all the processing that was required to get that turn it around. And it was still low resolution when they turned it around. So it's a work in progress. Next question.
Guy Cochran here on the panel is up with Joe. Can we show the public image on LinkedIn of the commentary switching center and get some insight as to what we're seeing in the image?
Yeah, I'm not sure what image he's talking about, but yeah.
Here's the image. I'll go ahead and pull it up, even though you haven't said yes yet. But
okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah. So just a rundown as to what we're seeing.
Yeah.
The up
Aaron,
on the
can
wall.
you pin him? Because I'm not seeing it in the feedback. Oh, he's working on it.
Okay. Well, on the back wall, what you're seeing is simply video monitors that we use to monitor picture, because we'll be listening to.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. We'll be monitoring international sound coming from the venues, meaning the ambient sound of the venue. So there's picture to go with that. And then there's two screens that are showing metering. One of them are MADI paths that come into the IBC. The second one, and that's the second screen that has the black to it. Those are monitoring the international sound feeds coming in from all the venues. That's a very important service that we provide because it gives the rights holders at the IBC the sound of the venue to put behind certain things. But then the row of computers and monitors that are kind of in the middle there, that's where we can monitor and test any signal coming in and out of the IBC through our system. There's approximately a little over 4,000 four wires, meaning 4,000 sends and 4,000 receives going on. And every day we test almost all of those signals, and it's done by the operators in that row. In the very back on the left-hand side is the I'll say the boss's chair. There's always a guy that will sit there and deal with any issues that come in and help troubleshoot. And it's really about that simple.
And those bars, those color bars, are matchboxes.
Yeah, I guess that's just that's thrown up there. I don't know if they're getting ready.
They just look like matchbox sync signals. Yeah, they
yeah,
are. Yeah. So, I just, when you see the bars and you see the little circle in the center, you go, "That's a matchbox." So
yeah,
that's for those watching. That's to tighten audio and video sync. It's a piece of hardware that a lot of us use. So, next question. Oh, you're gonna say something else, Joe?
I was just say I learned something in this games that really kind of astounded me. You're talking about syncing audio and video picture. Our audio system across all venues they're all synchronized within nanoseconds of each other. So even the venues that are 100 kilometers away are within nanoseconds of the one that's right next door to us. And I found that astounding.
So they're making the correction for whatever latency is required to get it over the, wow.
I think Tucker knows more about that than I do. He spent, we have a really good technician out of Australia that puts that system together, and Tucker got to spend an hour or so with him one day. He probably understands it better than me.
It was very neat. There's a central master clock, and then they're doing GPS sync for the remote sites. But it's yeah.
I mean, they've gone
the
beyond
scale of it's
Black
what's
Burst.
incredible. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah,
Go
it's
ahead,
incredible though.
Yeah, Courtney.
Is the audio all 48 24-bit, or is it 44.1 and 16-bit?
Or 48? Yeah.
48K, or
is it 48K, or is it?
I think it's 48K. I gotta, it's strange that I don't know that, but yeah, I think it's 48K.
Yeah. Next question. Can't hear you, Bill.
Stan Chan, Roseville, California is up next, and he says, how does OBS capture the 22.2 channel audio in their MPEG-4 AAC stream? What are the applications for downstream services?
I don't know if we know that. Go ahead, Mickey.
Not my department, so I don't know what I can talk about, but a lot of microphones, a lot of multi-channel microphones.
Very good. Next question.
Alex Gollner out of London is here up next with, what is the video and audio feed specs, frame rate, interlace, and so forth, and how many audio channels? Speaking of that last question.
I don't know if we know what that is. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, the spec rate, there's a few different things that go on because, and this kind of goes back to the previous question about the audio pass at the bigger venues. Like tonight, I went and sat with, there's an 8K 22.2 surround theater that you can go in. The screen is massive. It's the biggest screen I've ever seen. And so certain venues will come in, that are processed that way and then down converted or whatever. And I don't know what the standard is for the other venues, but there's really not, our commentary audio is coming in on these basic MADI streams and then, going out a variety of different ways, depending on what the client wants.
Yeah. Next question.
Hey, Mitchells is back up from Washington, D.C. Can Joe post a copy of the instructions he sent to Chris Fenwick to the Discord so we can all learn from it? Thanks.
I think I can do that. Let me check tomorrow, but I think it's all right because I was allowed to give it out to anybody else who is coming to work. So, and there's no secrets in it.
Yeah.
So
great. Next question.
Excellent. Roscoe Jones, for Tucker and Mickey, what has been the most impressive tech or implementation of tech you have seen? And I noticed that Brian Maddox is in here. I don't know if his mic is finally working, but.
What was the thing that impressed you guys the most that you can talk about? Go ahead, Mickey.
I think essentially the scale of everything. Because for majority of the pipelines for the broadcasts, it's mostly nothing groundbreaking, but it's just so massive in scale. That's what's amazing for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely same thing. Scale and the fact that the entire city is a studio.
Yeah.
The amount of
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, sorry. I think, yes, I see green things. I'm sure my audio sounds terrible, but at least you can hear me. Yeah, I would third that, yeah, the sheer scale of things. I'm in the stadium and it's a very big thing. And I saw the biggest jib I've ever seen in my life. I've seen the biggest tower cam that I've ever seen in my life. The amount of RF is mind-blowing. Antenna farms for days. I could go on and on and on. It's none of it's like I've never seen this before. It's just I've never seen, like, yes, it's exactly that. It's just sort of like when the jib cam looks like it's like the stairway to heaven, and it's like, 100 feet long. It's just a whole nother thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Just as a photographer, there's always one set of images I'm always waiting for from Canon. And if anyone knows anything about Canon and the Olympics, they go hand in hand. And the images actually came out yesterday. So this is a visual representation of what Taka, Mickey, and Brian were talking about. I know these cameras, I know these lenses, but I've never seen a room or a cage, which actually knows this is, that has this kind of scale. So these are the, the pro cameras, the 1D X Mark IIIs and the lenses, but the lenses go on forever. Rows and rows and rows of these lenses.
Yeah.
So the way it is, professional photographers will hire these from Canon, of course. They're maintained by Canon, fixed by Canon. So every piece of equipment inside the stadiums is A1 condition. So I think like Panavision in the film industry.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Talking about the scale, I said prior to this Olympics, I handled the commentary equipment, and we had right around 10,000 items that were barcoded that we tracked just for our department. And then we had probably another 5,000 items that weren't barcoded, and some would return, some wouldn't. So yeah, you got to go with that massive scale.
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
Do all of those get returned to the venue, or do they stay at the venue the whole time, or do they get packed away at night and then put back out in the daytime?
Are you talking about the cameras, Aaron?
Or just equipment?
Just equipment in general, like OBS equipment. Like, how do you, is that something you have to deal with?
Mickey?
Yeah, so each venue has a broadcast compound, which is where majority of the broadcast equipment gets stored. For the commentary, we have our CCR, the commentary control room, which is where we store the commentary equipment. So they don't all go back to the warehouse every day.
But they do get stored on site every day.
They're not left on the tables,
right?
I guess the question. Or do they get left where they're at?
That I believe that varies from venue to venue.
Yeah. Next question.
Yeah, I think Carl just mentioned the camera cage. That's pretty normal, secure place for all those lenses. A. Mitchells in Washington has our next comment. He says, great to see everyone doing well, though it's always great to see you all. But did yesterday's earthquake affect anything in the production or events? 6.0 seems pretty high after the last major one, but also didn't seem to interrupt much.
Yeah. As a Californian, I was like, 6. It probably was a fun ride. Go ahead, Joe.
When I was here for BTP, we had an earthquake. We had an earthquake shortly after I got here, and then we had the earthquake this morning. They're smaller ones. We've also had a typhoon. And then, of course, we've had COVID. So, no, we just keep going.
Yeah. Next question.
Next one comes in from A. Mitchells again. He said, how would production deal with a significant unexpected incident like the earthquake? And how would this change if it didn't affect production directly, but affected the games? What are the tailback systems that we don't hear about?
Are there any specific protocols? Go ahead, Joe.
Well, we have redundant paths on things. I don't want to talk about Tokyo specifically, but I can tell you in Rio, we had venues that were on the other side of the country, and the fiber transmission paths ran on opposite sides of the country. So there are things in place, in case of something like an earthquake, interrupting things.
Yeah. Next question.
Comes from Alex Skolner in London. And Alex says, does the Olympics pay crew above, below, or about average? And do you get good accommodations?
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about the pay. I don't want to go there. But I'll say I've got a pretty nice apartment for Japan, and in previous games I've had some pretty amazing apartments. You know, because I'm usually doing longer stay. The other guys might answer for their accommodations here.
They're in Japan. You know, like that's a good. I was in Japan for 6 weeks. It was great. It wasn't the most amazing apartment ever, but I was like in Japan, and it's a great experience. You know, to be in Tokyo. It's an amazing city. Next question.
Douglas
What are you gonna say, Tucker?
Oh.
Yeah, putting everything into the scale context really helps. I mean, they feed us at the venues, and that's been great. The accommodations, I mean, it is a tiny Tokyo room, but it is a nice tiny Tokyo room. So yeah, no, they take really good care of us, and I'm no complaints. So
next question.
Douglas Carmichael, back from I don't know where. He says, how does OBS handle IT infrastructure management? Is that done by an OBS team, or is it all IT on-sites who have the responsibility of, it says Atos here, but I wonder if he's talking about Atmos recording or something.
Not sure about that one. Go ahead, Joe.
I don't know. Excuse me. I don't know too much about IT. I'm pretty IT ignorant, but we have there's one IT department for OBS in general, and then the commentary department has its own IT department because we can monitor the PCs that are used for the audio system from the IBC. We can monitor those anywhere. So there are Cisco switches everywhere.
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
From what I understand, each venue also has an IT department which handles basic internet connectivity for the people on site. And the OBS IT department also takes care of the ATOS side of things, who handles the CIS, the commentary information system.
Next question.
Alex 4D Goldner in London is back again, and he says, Joe Wasser, can you recollect anything about how recent cities organize things technically that might have changed the way you work individually?
Wow, technically from city to city? No, I mean, you just watch this. I've been doing this since '96. So you see this constant growth and change in technologies. And the event is large enough that we can tend to bring technology into a city that maybe wouldn't have had it before. A lot of fiber was added in Rio. You know, that just little changes like that, but nothing in particular.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is interested in a picture Mickey must have posted a few days ago about the broadcast center, and it seems LAWO, L-A-W-O products were used. What role did they play? I saw a LAWO MC2 audio console at a demo event and was impressed by it.
Go ahead, Mickey.
So yeah, this was an image that the guy was showing earlier of the switching commentary switching center, and from what I understand, at least from what I heard from Brian, is that majority of the backbone is now based on LAWO, while a part of the venue, some of the venues are on LAWO, and part of the venues are on the older system that they're switching out of.
Next question.
Aaron Huslage of Durham, North Carolina. What is the split between logistics and production in this work?
What is the split? Just how much time you spend on it. Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this in a pre-show one time. Like, I think logistics is majority of the work in putting together this broadcast.
And that's the reality of most production. Most production is, you know, like I always go back to, I mean, anyone around me will hear me say over and over and over again, I'll just quote General Omar Bradley, that, you know, amateurs talk about strategy and professionals talk about logistics, you know, and that's the, you know, it's logistics is everything. Go ahead, Joe.
I talked to a friend of mine was the head of production for one of the Olympics, and he said that it's all about logistics. It's all about putting people on buses, having food there, because they, you hire people that know what they're doing. They'll take care of the job. You just have to get them there and keep them from getting hungry.
Yeah. Next question.
That's a quote. I'm going to sample that. Get them here and keep them from getting hungry.
Next question.
Mike Terpstra, Janesville, Wisconsin. It looks like. Is anybody here working at the venues in Tokyo? We manufactured the parabolic mics being used, but they are never shown during the broadcast. A snapshot of one of them at the venues would be wonderful.
Has anyone seen the parabolics? They're hidden in there. I'm sure they're getting lots of the stuff that we listen to. Parabolics are amazing. Paul, ping me on Discord. Like I'd like to know how to pick one, because I'm looking at getting one for my house, mostly just for the birds. But I grew up with parabolics and they're really cool. So yeah, maybe we'll see some photos of it. Next question.
Comes from A. Mitchell's. How much equipment is rented or provided by vendors on site rather than part of the OBS permanent store or purchased new at the time?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
The main commentary system is owned by OBS. Now, the Lavo equipment we're using is a rental at this time. Lavo, I don't think, has sold it to anybody. But then a lot of the other ancillary things, a lot of the Cisco switches and things like that are rented. So there is some rental. Headsets we own, which is interesting. We own, if I remember correctly, 2,500 and some headsets. And, so a lot of it is owned because it's such a quantity, you can't really go and rent that much at any point.
And you have time to set it up and process it. I mean, I think there's a lot of advantages to the core systems being owned. Next question.
Sky Gleason in Seattle comes in with, what's the difference for you without the people in the stands?
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
From a sheer person on the field standpoint, getting gear out and setting it up is a lot easier without crowds.
Yeah, you ask any production people, they're like every time someone asks me like, hey, we're going to put people in the audience, I'm like, why do we have to? Do we have to do that? Are they really needed? Because I would love to get rid of them. So that's all, that's my general state. So yeah. So I think we're production. That's a general production response, not a producer's response. We have to have the feel and we have to have the thing. What I've noticed is we just hear a lot of conversations. I've noticed in some of these shows where you just hear conversations between coaches and folks that we would never hear if the audience was there, which I find it to be really fascinating. Yeah, go ahead, Tucker.
I have to say the really interesting thing, specifically to my venue for judo, was that we didn't have a traditional audience, but the audience we did have was all the coaches and other athletes. And so what we had was a small, incredibly well-educated audience. And so it was really interesting to watch because, frankly, judo is pretty boring to watch. The highlight reels are fantastic, but the sport itself was kind of boring. And but the actual, they would get excited about something and you go, oh, I don't know what just happened, but that was really technical. That was neat.
Well, it's funny. This is where I think that there's other commentaries that are possible. We experimented with extra commentaries for basketball. So we were doing streams for basketball, and I don't know before we did this, we did 26 games of basketball. And what we had was a former player and a social media person talking back and forth and giving you play-by-play and talking through what was happening that wasn't caught up in the broadcast, wasn't trying to call the show, was just talking about what it takes to do this. And I learned more about basketball than, now it was 26 games, but within the first 3 or 4 games, I completely changed how I looked at basketball because now I understood it. I understood, they're doing this person's standing there. So when this person runs by, they can block them and they can do all this, I didn't understand any of that. It was just like a bunch of people running around throwing the ball. And as soon as you understand it, you suddenly, you suddenly got it and enjoyed it. And I think that it's something that all sports, especially sports that aren't the major sports, could use more of, is commentary that is designed literally a separate feed. And what we've been talking about is like a second ear experience. That's what we were working on, which is that you can even be in the stadium and having someone just talk about it so that you understand what you're looking at, because, you know, a lot of us don't understand for a lot of these, like what makes that great. Go ahead, Carl.
So it's funny you mentioned that. So this happened last weekend for Formula One. So there's a pit lane commentary, which is, you're right, social media person, exactly what Alex just said, and a former driver, and much more laid back and talking about, you know, other things. Then you've got the high octane main commentary, the world commentary, for English anyway. Now there was a problem where they actually put the pit lane commentary into the main feed for the first 5 laps, and Twitter went on fire saying, no, this is terrible, terrible. I want the high octane commentary from the expert who's been doing this 20 years. And so Formula One had to actually put up the entire video on YouTube of the main commentary later on. So people could actually just rewatch it with the main commentary, because they kind of screwed up the commentary for the first 5 laps.
Ours was completely separate, so it didn't, you know, we were completely outside of the broadcast, so it didn't matter. But I found that to be, I just feel like there's a whole market there for just producing commentary that explains everything in detail. And then another one that could be totally inside baseball, you know, like this like super expert, like we're assuming that this is the only thing you think about. You know, and I think that with the internet, we can spread this stuff out where we can have lots of commentaries at different levels. You know, go ahead, Joe.
One of the other jobs I do is the World Series, and MLB produces a World English feed that typically is much more instructive. And I spend a lot of time listening to that when I do that job, and there's so much more appreciation for baseball now. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, and it would be good for a lot of little league coaches to watch that. That's all I gotta say. It was like mechanics. Anyway, so all right. Well, thank you. I just want to thank Tucker and Joe and Mickey and Brian. When I scheduled this, I did not expect you guys to show up, especially when I announced it with no warning, because it was in the list for next week, and then something changed this week, and so I was like, oh, I'll just move it, you know, to this week. We'll do another one next week because we only got through audio on this one, which was perfect because we had the perfect people here. But we've got some other stuff we can look at, and so we'll do another one of these sessions because there's so much to learn. It was funny when I was grabbing the video that I wanted to show, where we're going to cut through video and talk through it. I couldn't believe it how much stuff I had to talk about in like a 1-minute clip that I was capturing. I was like, oh, look at this, and look at what they did here, and look at what they did here, and look at the camera back here, and I suddenly realized that we could spend, you know, a day, you know, cutting through. It's just that because the Olympics is at this other level of production that there's so much paid attention to for all the little bits and pieces, that there's just so much and I want to make sure that we, you know, pull all the marrow out of that before we go too far. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I just want to say thanks for letting me on. I had no intention of doing this. I came back to my room, and there's times I've got microwave dumplings that are sitting in there, but I started watching and I was going nuts. It's like, I got to get in on this. So
Well,
I apologize.
I'm glad we were able to bait you in. All we have to do is answer a bunch of questions badly, and then I'm sure that you were like, oh my gosh, these guys have no idea what they're talking about. I got to go in there and set the record straight so that our mission was accomplished.
It was only a little bit of that.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for having me on.
You're kind. So anyway, thank you so much for, what I love is, and what I'm hoping we're gonna be able to do more of as we keep on going forward, there's this interaction that's going on where, you know, members of office hours are hiring other members, and they're ending up in productions, and now they're ending up back in pushing that knowledge back in, which hopefully generates more people that understand it, which means that there's more people to hire and there's more people to, you know, interact. And so there's a, you know, kind of we're getting to a point where the community's starting to mature, you know, into that process. So I'm excited. This has been like this little step forward in this has been a huge step for us. So thanks. Really glad to have you guys here. And we are, tomorrow we'll talk about something else. So I'm afraid my horizon of events, due to a couple issues on my end, it's like right in front of my nose at the moment. So we'll be working on that. We'll push this out over August. So anyway, thanks to everyone. Thanks to the producers. Great questions. Great set of questions. And thanks to our panelists for a great conversation. Yet again, we are only a couple away from 2 away. I think we're at 498. Episode 498 right now. I think 500 is on Friday. So great work, and great to the producers, great to the panelists. And now we're going to see you tomorrow, where we'll talk about something new, or we'll see you in a couple minutes in After Hours, which goes now 21 hours straight.